Good afternoon and welcome to Hire Smarter Strategies for Finding, Vetting, and Keeping the Right People. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Raleigh Merrill with GTM. In a moment, I'll introduce to you our presenter, Sara Martin. But first, feel free to use the questions functionality on your screen to ask your questions during today's presentation. You'll find that box on the upper right of your screen with a little question mark in there. And you're welcome to do that. Just plug right in there when you want to ask your questions, and then we'll get to as many of those questions as we can at the end of today's presentation. If we don't get to your particular question, we'll follow up with you the next day. Also, you'll receive an email later today with a link to watch a video recording as well as a PDF version of this presentation. Our presenter today is Sara Martin, a senior HR consultant for GTM. Sara has 25 years of comprehensive human resources experience with expertise in associate relations, conflict resolution, and employee engagement initiatives. Sara has a commitment to bringing people together and ensuring job satisfaction, efficiency, and teamwork whenever possible. Before joining GTM, Sara spent 18 years at Price Chopper as a human resources manager. At this point, I'd like to turn things over to Sara Martin.
Thank you, Raleigh, and thank you everyone for being here today in this very important topic and ever-changing topic and quickly changing topic these days, right? Just like everything else that we're dealing with. Things are happening very quickly, and important to stay on top of the latest and greatest and deciding what trends, work for you and which ones don't, right? And we'll talk about that quite a bit today as well. So as Raleigh said, I've capped my experience, I say 25 plus years now in human resources. Anything, longer just really dates me. But I have a lot of experience in the staffing, talent acquisition, executive placement arenas. In fact, that's how I got my start into human resources. I worked for a temporary staffing company, and I really do love finding the right people for the right organizations for the right positions and making sure we do what we can to vet that ahead of time. And I'll share, I help GTM with a lot of their internal recruiting, and I love our systems. I love our processes. So I'll give you a little sneak peek here as we're talking about processes. But what we want to focus on today, again, talking about these modern recruiting strategies. I'm talking about hiring platforms, integration of these, how AI, can be used to be efficient, effective, and also making sure that we manage the risks and stay involved when we're using AI. We'll talk about improved interview protocols. We'll reduce legal and compliance risks. Certainly, we all have experience, or maybe you haven't, and that is amazing. But most of you have probably experienced the cost of a bad hire. And the fact that, I think somebody typed in here, slow, fast to hire, slow to fire, that is not a good situation, right? So we want to really take our time and vet our candidates, our applicants. And I also do know that there are situations and positions where you don't have a lot to draw from. So we might touch on that as well. And certainly, and most importantly, if you do nothing else from this webinar, to either ask yourself or ask the people in charge, what does our succession plan look like? When's the last time we looked at it? And how can we make this an ongoing part of our business? Right? So we don't want to leave big gaps when there's a position open. So you want to kind of have those people waiting in the wings, right? Kind of sitting on the bench, if you will. So we'll talk about that process as well. And, while Trevor is, moving us on to the next slide, if you want to type in any questions, any challenges, we did get some questions that we'll handle at the end, but certainly I want to make sure that I'm touching on, kind of what made you show up for this today? What are your challenges? And I'll keep an eye on that as well. So let's delve right in here to hiring smarter. Please, raise your virtual hand if you have been in this arena. I call it BC and AC, right? Before COVID and after COVID, especially in the retail world, in a lot of blue collar jobs. Thank you, Larry. Yes, the landscape changed an awful lot, right? As far as we hired up when all of this was happening, especially in the grocery business. But then after, it was like, where did everyone go? Like, it felt like everyone just kind of reassessed their lives, right? Landscapes changed about how you could make money. So people are Ubering and, creating their own businesses, deciding they don't need as much money as they thought they did. So, a lot of things changed, after COVID, and they continue to do so. And we'll talk about, I have a recent college graduate who's like, no, don't want to join that matrix. So, we as employers need to keep being creative on how we go to market, if you will, not just with your products and your services. How do we go to market to get the right people in the right places at the right time? Because that is key to having a successful organization, right? So certainly we know that the wrong hire can cost thousands in turnover, productivity, and morale. Okay, Trevor, can you go back, please? Okay, certainly. And, the termination process, as we talked about, can be arduous. The competition for skilled talent continues to increase. And, the landscapes of what is needed, especially as AI comes on the scene, people are going to need to stay very flexible and in touch with the landscape. Strong hiring systems can reduce risk and improve your intention. And as I mentioned, and I will continue to mention throughout this, succession planning and ongoing hiring are key. So we know that there can be financial losses from lack of job knowledge, a learning curve, and mistakes that can be made even with the best hire, right? It takes time to get them up to speed. Turnover definitely has an impact on your current staff. Certainly, I'm guessing many of you have probably experienced being short-staffed. I'll talk about that and the impact that it has on businesses, on organizations. I just had a conversation about that this morning. So certainly you don't want to leave these gaps. And that's why I'm talking about ongoing succession planning. I'm sure we've all been surprised. That person you thought was going to retire from that spot all of a sudden got the best offer, or their spouse is getting relocated. We need to continuously network and plan for the unplanned, right? So certainly there's a loss of productivity. A lot of times, when people are not being as conscientious as they should in hiring, your other staff is watching that, right? So they can lose trust in leadership. It can impact morale, especially when people do feel like they're doing 3 jobs for the price of 1. Certainly experience that, when the pool is shallow, if you will, for hiring. So we want to make sure that we're constantly recruiting. And certainly if, a person comes in with a bad attitude or, has just a negative attitude, that can be contagious, unfortunately, and that can impact the team as well. And we've talked about the termination process being a lot longer than the hiring process, a lot of times if you are, doing it correctly, which we do want to make sure we don't stick our head in the sand when things are not working out, because that can affect our A and B players. So this slide here shows in hundreds of dollars, the turnover of the lost productivity, training, legal risk, morale, The next slide here has actual costs associated. I think it's good to look at the numbers, right? And remind ourselves why we want to be diligent, why we want constant recruiting to be part of our landscape, part of our culture. It shouldn't just be up to human resources or talent acquisition to be recruiting, right? I know GTM makes it a group effort. They provide links for all of us to say, hey, there's this open job, and send it to your people and put it on LinkedIn. So we'll talk about that as well, of using your staff, your leaders, all of your employees, your family members, everyone as recruiters, right? Making sure that you let people know what open positions are going on. And the reason for this is this, huge cost of turnover. So the estimate in New York State for 2026 is around $45,000. And that's just for your, midline supervisor role. So you'll see entry level roles, they say 30 to 50% of your annual salary, mid-level to professional, 100 to 150% of annual salary, and executives, up to 200% or more of annual salary if you're going without that leadership, for sure. So, it is a hard thing to measure, but it's an important thing to remember. Certainly, that loss of knowledge and human capital, that time to fill, the damage to the team and culture, your customer experience, right? Some of the mistakes being made of, maybe you're out of inventory because people are not, as skilled in what they're doing if they haven't been, with the company as long as some of your longer tenured people. Productivity can decline. Leadership gets distracted. I noticed that a lot at the grocery business. People love to just, well, who's going there and who's doing that? And and I'm like, let's focus on putting the peas on the shelf, so sometimes, when there's an open position or things are changing, it leads a lot of speculation and people can be distracted. And certainly you can, have legal exposure and compliance concerns, which we'll talk about how to stay focused on those as well. So best practices, as I said, making sure that this is an ongoing process. And again, hopefully pulling out a succession plan. And again, do not panic if you do not have one. And certainly, people can help. That is something that GTM does. That's something that I love doing, helping people with their succession planning, which also has a really awesome impact on morale when you start talking to your people that already exist within your organization about what do they want to do, what skills do they need to learn. Really paying attention to them can help with morale. And having these conversations can help with your succession plan. So think about, your A plus and your B players. Do they have some things in common, right? Let's start with the end in mind. Let's start with the qualified, successful employee, right? Who has been successful in this position and what is their background? Again, it's not a cookie cutter thing, but to have some ideas in mind of what their prior employer, what prior employers seem transferable here, right? And you might know some that, geez, if we hire from this competitor, it doesn't go well, right? So there's also the opposite of that. But thinking about your successful people now, what's their education level, and again, not stereotyping, but, certainly having some thoughts about what kind of background really, has been proven to be successful, because we can think something and somebody can look really good on paper, and then when they come into the culture, it's not the best fit. So it's helpful to use the knowledge you already have in your success stories that are there. Certainly you want, yes, thank you. Certainly, if you are customer facing and retail, you can gather information that way. Now, I had a little pushback in the beginning where, was interesting. Management they didn't want to be like, well, that's going to make it look like we're short staffed if we're, hiring. And now, any retailer you go in, everyone has signs up, right? They're at the gas pumps, they're in the window. I noticed Market 32 Price Shopper still has the contact me cards that I begged for, because we were just, there's information to be captured when you've got thousands of people walking through your buildings. Like, capture that information. Somebody might bring it home to their kid. So making sure you can get names, phone numbers, and emails if you are hiring blue collar and on a large scale. So we want to make it easy, and I'll talk about that again. You want to make sure your application is on your website on that homepage. If you are, an organization that hires quite frequently, make it easy. On LinkedIn, you want to use an applicant tracking system like the one we have at GTM is called iSolve, and we'll talk about the different platforms and the benefits. And again, not waiting for that bona fide opening to keep having conversations with somebody, right? If you are very specialized, let's say you employ underwater welders, right? That's a pretty specialized thing, but you're staffed right now. Well, you want to keep conversations going with underwater welders. You want somebody that knows where to find them, what they're up to, hey, would you be interested if we had a position? We don't right now, keeping that going. And then certainly having a good mix of internal and external. Sometimes if we promote too much within, we get very narrowed views of, how things should be. Maybe a little lack of new ideas, new perspectives. So it's good to pepper in those external hires as well. So 2026 hiring trends. Again, of course, we have AI assisted recruiting and screening. We'll talk about that more in depth. Skills-based hiring over degree only. I definitely recommend this. I will say, there was a period of time where in the retail industry and manufacturing, we were really focused on education level and that kind of thing. And I will say, after 20 years of this kind of experience, education was not a huge predictor on success. Because it's a people skilled business, because you are a working manager, a lot, you have to be willing to put the peas on the shelf, and I think that a lot of our positions these days, our leadership positions, require rolling those sleeves up and actually, being willing to do the work as well. And I think those leaders get a lot of respect that way too. So you want to, have a good mix, obviously, with professional positions like an engineer or a lawyer, you need that education as well. So making sure that you're, focused on both of those, and also remaining flexible on your work environment. So this is a big one. And I've seen a lot of clients really hit a wall with this, that they feel like people have to be in the office in order to be productive. And, there are many, many studies that that's not actually true. And, certainly a lot of work, requires that you are hands-on and you are in the office. And I do find a lot better collaboration, cooperation, team building, that kind of thing. But can you offer one day at home a week? Or, what kind of flexibility are people looking for? Because this generation that's showing up to apply for jobs, they're demanding work-life balance. I laugh that, we were talking about it 20 years ago. I'm not sure we really meant it. We have a population now that's demanding it. In fact, I was just doing a presentation and a gentleman was like, yes, we had somebody report that they weren't coming to work because, they had to go to the DMV or, whatever that is. There's an education about obligations at work as well. So it's a whole different ballgame. And, you're not alone in that. And I find it's a good mix of holding people accountable, educating them that, you need to do these things on your day off, but also remaining highly flexible so that people, do have that work-life balance, because then they are more productive. They're staying longer, they're collaborating more. So there are benefits to making sure people can have that kind of flexibility. So I think that's another thing you want to ask yourself, are we pretty hardcore in what our expectations are? How flexible can we be with the positions that we have open? And then certainly candidates expect faster communication and transparency. So that's where we'll talk about these applicant tracking systems. We'll talk about AI. We'll talk about automated responses. And we will talk about somebody having their hands in that system at least every other day. Because especially if you're hiring, you have to be quick, right? I'm sure many of us have called to make the job offer and they've already accepted something else. So that is the landscape we're in. We need to be diligent and, paying attention, almost on a daily basis. So let's talk about artificial intelligence and the recruitment process. So certainly using AI for resume screening and, chat bots for candidate communication, this is becoming, much more widely acceptable. AI scheduling tools can be used. And, with my 25 plus years experience, I will say I'm a little old school. And so these are helpful. And it really depends on your situation. Again, if you're in a mass hire situation, using AI as much as you can is helpful. I will also give you a little bit of the opposite of how I go about reaching out for candidates, because a lot of people, they want to email to schedule the appointment. So I do say it's like going 1990 and I just call them. And people answer the phone and I'm able to screen them and get them an interview the next day. So there is helpfulness in this, but I guess I also caution on being over reliant, because picking up the phone, again, which is a little foreign these days, most people need an appointment to make the phone call. But I have a lot of success and can move things very quickly in that realm. So I do recommend that as well. And again, making sure somebody is overseeing this process, because you want to make sure you want to avoid algorithmic bias. And there are some ethical concerns there with the algorithm. So there are some different AI applications out there. You've got Eightfold AI, which is best for enterprise level skill-based hiring. So it uses advanced deep learning to match candidates to open roles based on their transferable skills. Certainly, we all know that Indeed does this for us as well. So that can be helpful. We've got HireVue, which is a market leader in AI-driven video interviewing and automated assessments. So, let's say you have a call center and that's a very high turnover position. We actually did this as well. And again, it needs to be a technologically versed applicant pool that you're working with, but some of them can send you videos. You want to see their communication skills. So this can be a good screening interview, but I always, obviously recommend making sure we have that human interaction and dynamic questioning available, but that can be super helpful. And Paradox, known for its conversational AI assistant, Olivia, can act as a 24/7 recruiter chatbot that handles the high volume screening scheduling. So, those are helpful things. Like I said, if you're in a mass hire situation, if you're hiring, less than 2 or 3 people a month, I still recommend what I call old school, right? Just communicating verbally through email and those different channels. So We have Juice Box also that can help recruiters describe ideal candidates in plain natural language instead of complex language that may not reach your candidates. And Hire Easy, which is excellent for high volume outbound sourcing. Again, unifying profiles across 30 plus open web platforms. So that one's really helps expand your scope of applicants. So we have other AI recruiting and screening. Here, I won't read this slide to you. I believe, you will receive this so you can look these up. I do want to take a minute and again, to talk about iSolved, which is the human capital management system with AI technology available. This is, the payroll system that we use, that we, have available for sale, along with HR consulting positions. And again, I've used many of these. And I have found iSolve to be so helpful. I've used PeopleSoft. We changed to ADP when I left Price Chopper. But like I said, I do a lot of internal recruiting for GTM, and everything is very integrated. So that is helpful as well. And I know it can be difficult to say, okay, when am I ready for that investment? And I always say, 10 plus seems like when we really need to get structures and processes in place. And especially if you know that you're growing. If you're 10 plus and your goal is 40 to 50 plus, you definitely want an integrated applicant tracking system. So iSolved and, any of those that I mentioned certainly can help write your job ads by putting your job descriptions in there. They can help craft engaging ads. They can screen. And I will caution you on anything that you're using, again, AI, iSolve, any of the other platforms, to check out how they're screening, right? Because there's like in iSolve, there's a number of stars. So don't discount your 2-star or your 3-star. Like take a peek to say, what kind of algorithm is sorting these folks, right? Because they're not catching everything. So if you can look at most applicants or at least test the reliability to go through and be like, oh, okay, all the 2-star or all the ones they're not recommending really don't have the skills. But you want to double check the computer's work, because you might find kind of a needle in the haystack, if you will, with the rating system. So you want to make sure you're looking at those. And then certainly what's wonderful about these applicant tracking systems, and iSolve can just run reports of the metrics that we'll talk about that are important in measuring, that maybe many of your senior leadership are asking for, turnover data that you might want to share with certain leaders. So it's just really helpful to have it all integrated, because it's hiring, it's onboarding, it's payroll, it's communication, it's rewards, it's recognition. So, it really, again, like I said, if you are 10 plus, you want to really start looking at these systems and start getting some quotes and start budgeting for this, because it will make you very efficient. And I've come into some clients that have grown really quickly, and it's hard because they've got this for background checks, they've got this application for training, they've got this for applications, and none of them are talking to each other. So that can get complicated and really inefficient. So please, obviously, if you want to talk about iSolve, we've got people on board, and just start doing your research for sure. Anyone using iSolve right now, raising your hand? Wonderful. All right, Larry. I hope I'm speaking, again, very honestly, I find it very user friendly. And like I said, sometimes my learning curve's not great. So I have found it super, super easy to use and very user friendly. So how do we find the right people now that they've all dispersed BC, right? Or AC, I should say, after COVID? We talked about, again, using your network, right? We'll talk about a lot of these systems, but again, making sure everybody knows your open positions, that your staff knows, and making sure that you've got clear and specific job descriptions. You want to promote company culture and growth opportunities. Again, that's the other wonderful thing about recruiting for GTM is that it's so easy to talk about the company culture and how supportive it is, how transparent they are, the fact that GTM walks their talk as an organization. So certainly you want to, again, do you have a mission statement? Do you even know what your selling points are? So you want to brainstorm that as you're pulling those people together with that succession plan that you're reviewing here in the next couple of weeks. You want to say, what are our selling points? So make sure you know those. You want to use targeted outreach instead of mass postings for specific positions. So we're going to talk about blue collar and white collar. Again, sometimes you are mass marketing if it's an entry level position that most people can do, right? So sometimes you're in that position as well. And then certainly you want to create a streamlined application process. Trevor, you can go to the next slide, but I just want to talk about that streamlined application process and my experience with it. And we moved from a very simple process to a more complicated, both in a manufacturing environment. I worked in a manufacturing environment before the retail environment. And this is when assessments were very popular. So the application process took about an hour for a minimum wage job. So I would steer clear of that, especially in this day and age. We were talking about people's attention spans. I call it the TikTok attention span. So, certainly an assessment, once you have screened that person and told them that it's coming and that there's a mutual interest in the position, I would recommend doing your assessments then, unless it's 10 minutes or less, because you will lose people from your application process if it is not easy. So that's the other thing I love about iSolved. It's tied into Indeed. We do not ask for a full application until we do a screening. So you just, again, I don't know if anybody else has been in that position. I've been in positions where I'm like, if I didn't want this job so bad, I'd be done here because there's an hour-long assessment, which are helpful. We're going to talk about assessments as well. So certainly, just make sure you go on and know what your process is and how long it takes, and that it's relevant to the people applying for the job. So for white collar positions, you want to use LinkedIn. If you're in HR, you want to keep posting, you want to keep sharing, you want your leaders to share open positions, you want your people to share how fun and exciting it is to work there, because that's part of your marketing strategy. You want to use Indeed for broad visibility. This, is the most popular item, and it's hard. I know from my recruiting that we do get a lot of applicants, so narrowing that down can be difficult, but it's a good problem to have. ZipRecruiter certainly has good AI functions for matching candidates with your positions. Glassdoor helps with employer branding, industry-specific job boards, and publications, right? I worked for a lobby firm, and it was still, their, affiliate publication where they got a lot of job leads. So think about industry-specific marketing that goes out to people as well that you can use for white-collar recruiting. For blue collar, as I mentioned, Indeed is still a good grab for that mass hiring. Facebook Marketplace, local community groups like Craigslist, again, for regional. Trade schools, apprenticeship programs, making sure, I know that we used to go to Hudson Valley Community College locally. I think it was Global Foundries that they were hiring their whole electrical engineering class at one point in like the early 2000s. So get to know what programs are out there, especially if you have specialized work and you want to start having those conversations with those juniors and those seniors and getting to, the trade schools or speaking in classes, just knowing being out in the community is super helpful. Employee referral programs. I always say good people know good people. Somebody had some disagreement in that. I think they had a bad experience. So certainly just because it's employee referral doesn't mean we're not going to vet them, as we will discuss moving forward. And again, like I said, make it easy to gather information. It's okay to, have a phone number and have a conversation. Does this sound like a job for you? And then gear them towards how to apply. Let's make sure this is worth everybody's time. So recruiting funnels, obviously you start with, the applicant pool, using the screening tools to save you time, conducting structured interviews. We're going to talk about that. References and credentials. It still surprises me. I'm very happy about how much a reference will tell you. So make sure you are calling them and having specific conversations. That to me is the best hiring strategy you can use, because somebody could tell you anything in an interview. You will learn a lot by calling a reference, because if they have good things to say, they will say them all. And if they don't, they will verify dates of employment. And this isn't always the way. Some people will only verify dates of employment because that's a policy. But most people, if they have something good to say, they know there's no risk in that. So they will tell you that. And then we're going to talk about onboarding and making sure we're keeping the people that we're hiring. This is, again, just another visual of the hiring funnel, but also to remind us how much work it takes to find one person. And that's why I feel like it should be ongoing, because a new hire can take 30 days in a very efficient process. So again, you want that part, the early parts done if you're starting with 500 people to get to one, which is often the case. So optimizing your jobs on Indeed, you want to use the right keywords, a clean searchable job title. So think about that. Some of us like to be very creative in our job titles, but who's going to apply if I have no idea what that even is? So, be careful about getting too creative. Again, a job ad that sells. So this is your brainstorm here. Maybe after you're, watching this, what are our selling points? You want to keep your ads fresh and distinct. So, check those. Are you still using your ad from 2011? You want to upgrade those, and you want people. This is, I watched somebody come on board in our marketing department when I was at Price Chopper, and we were always food and fruit. And, when it came to recruitment, it's like, no, you want to show other people having a great time at work. Being transparent about pay, that's part of our compliance conversation too. Hopefully we all know in New York State, you are required to put it on a job posting. I think it's amazing. I think it's helpful. I always lead with that in screening, and we'll talk about that as well. And those of you, I hope that use Indeed, know that you want to make a new job probably every 2 weeks, or else they fall to the bottom of whatever Indeed's going to do for your marketing. So you want to make sure that you are reposting positions. You want to sponsor ads strategically, and certainly monitor your performance on Indeed as well. So let's talk about interview questions that reveal what resumes don't. So again, starting with screening, I do recommend if you can set up a Teams call. Sometimes that's hard if you're going to use my old school 1990, I'm just going to call you situation for screening, which, I do find you can get a lot over the phone, but also being able to make eye contact and, really see somebody's mannerisms and how they interact can be super helpful, especially if it's depending on the job. If it's a customer facing or, sales position, you really want to be able to see that person during the screening. Use structured interviews for consistency. So role specific behavioral questions. That's what we do here at GTM. Be specific to, it can help you kind of weed out somebody who might have used AI for their resume and those who can speak intelligently about the skills that you're looking for. And again, using, structured things can help you score candidate against other criteria. And then, certainly limiting your bias using evaluation. So we'll talk about that as well. I've already mentioned, Trevor, you can go to the next. I've already mentioned, using that after the application process, depending what you're hiring for. Sometimes it makes sense as part of the hiring process, but a lot of times it's, after the screening, once you know that you are definitely interested. So again, Teams and Zoom, discuss pay right away. Don't waste, anyone's time. And then the position specific questionnaires. So behavioral interview questions are key because I feel like most people can Google generic interview questions and what the good answers are for them. So you want to dig specifics. Tell me about a time you handled conflict and what the outcome was. Describe a major challenge and how you solved it. How do you prioritize competing deadlines? Certainly specific questions related to the jobs that you are interviewing for. So a cashier, tell me about your cash handling, experience and how often, was your drawer short or over, what kind of, procedures were in place and how many times, did you have to maybe get coached and counseled on your cash handling, very specific so that you can kind of get under the hood, if you will. So you want to ask for measurable accomplishments. You want to explore accountability and ownership. What do you do when faced with, a difficult customer? Or tell me about a time that you made a mistake and how you handled it. Communication and adaptability. Verify consistency between resume and responses. So, certainly make sure you have your resume, the resume in front. Make sure that you spent at least 4 minutes with that resume before the person walks in as well. This is one huge mistake I see, is that we are all so busy, and I call it like sliding into home, and hunting for the resume as the person sitting down at your desk. It's not a good look. You want to be just as prepared as we expect the interviewee to be. So red flags during an interview, frequent unexplained job changes. Although I will say, this is something that's changed over the course of 20, 25 years, is that we used to look for 5, 10 years, longevity at a position. And I think it's down to 2 or 3. People do change jobs a lot more frequently, a lot of time for good reason. A lot of times maybe because they are being sought after, because it is a competitive landscape. So, they're getting other job offers. So we want to be careful if you have, again, what I call that old school mentality of, ooh, too many jobs in a short time frame. I've definitely had to change my mindset around that. So, but again, if it's every 3 months, that's certainly reason for concern. How are they dressed? Do they have questions? Do they feel prepared? Did they show up disheveled? Inconsistent employment history, poor communication, eye contact. I'm finding that a whole struggle with the generation of screen, people that are on screens a lot. If that's important, and it's customer facing, you want to make sure that you're watching for that, or any blamed focused answers, right? Disparaging their old employer, their old boss, you know, if that's going to be, if that was them, that could be us, right? So, and of course, compliance matters. We want to make sure we are being compliant and legal in our interviewing here. So background checks, I have mixed feelings about, and it really depends what you are hiring for. So certainly highly sensitive positions like childcare, elder care, education, you want to make sure you're doing those. I believe I saw a question of, geez, it seems like we have to hire most people anyway, regardless of their background. Is it worth the money? And again, yes, it's worth the money if you have very sensitive positions. Some positions are require you to do background checks, right? If it's law enforcement or something like that. But if it's childcare, elder care, education, you want to make sure you are doing due diligence and making sure that this person does not have any relevant criminal background. You can check professional license certifications and really verify employment as well. You want to understand the EEOC guidelines as far as fair hiring and making sure that you're not discriminating in the interview questions, in your assessments. You want to document your hiring decisions carefully, and you want to stay compliant with state and federal laws. So in staying compliant with those state and federal laws, we want to look at how we're classifying. And I believe we've done a whole separate webinar on this. We do have some experts with comp and benefits, so I won't run through all of this, but understanding, most importantly, independent contractors versus employees, and that in New York State, there's a right to control test that determines 1099 versus an employee. So if you have 1099s, you just want to, you make sure they have the latitude to be contractors. And, you know, if you are managing the how, when, and the where the work is done, you want to look at that, because it could be that this person needs to become an employee if you are directing all of their work. And then there are federal economic realities tests similar to this. So we're giving you the resources to search, this information. So just, be sure, especially if you're dealing with contractors, and then the exempt versus non-exempt as well. And that's something GTM or your HR department can help with. So these are, yeah, thank you. Thank you, Trevor. That's fine. Yeah, we're going to send this to you, so you'll have the websites as well. So we want to hire with retention in mind. Now that we've gone over the, how it can take 30 days to hire somebody, right? So we want to avoid that bad hire. You want to slow the decision process down. So, we are saying be quick about it, but I also really encourage making sure the hiring manager is involved, right? Even if it's a department manager level, making sure whoever this person's going to be working for, at least gets a walk around the department, or, it has has some input in this person that's going to be working for them. You want to check references, as I mentioned before. You want to prioritize cultural alignment and accountability. So again, if you have, a very serious accounting firm and people like it quiet and they're plugged in, and somebody comes in and they're super gregarious and they're like, and we'll change all this, and you'll know that would be disruptive in your culture that is operating, within certain structures, and it's going well, and that would be disruptive. So we want to pay attention to that. We want to remember that skills can be taught and that attitude is everything. So certainly setting up clear expectations immediately, which can be done during the interview, right? So you want to reiterate that job description, reiterate what the expectations are, structure your questions around what those expectations are, and you'll be setting that groundwork even during a screening interview. You want structured training, a mentor, a peer, or a buddy, regular check-ins. Let's not forget about these folks. Pay attention, be proactive. Again, making sure, once a week, especially for those new hires, checking in, hey, how's it going? And then making sure you have a 90 days circle back to check on them as well. Time goes fast while we're having fun. So like I said, letting people know what the expectations are, letting people know what your busy seasons are, letting people know, again, we're a payroll company, so there are times at year end where vacation time might be hard to take. Telling people what some of these challenges are right up front is super helpful. Candidates are always evaluating employers. And again, that strong communication builds trust. So you want to make sure that you're being real honest about some of the challenges, and certainly, balancing that out with the benefits and the exciting parts of working for your organization. So you want to look at time to hire, cost per hire, first year turnover, quality of hire metrics, and candidate satisfaction. So some of this is through meeting with that candidate. Hey, what did you think about the onboarding process? What was the follow-up like? Some softer things, but also an applicant tracking system like an iSolved can help you run reports to measure a lot of these metrics. I like to talk about inclusion and equity. Like I said, I'll be quick here. Most of you have seen Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and feeling included is a huge part of that, right? First, people need to feel safe as far as pay. Where am I going? Where is the bathroom? Where do I park? Right? You can kind of use this as your onboarding process, right? I want to make sure that they feel comfortable physically, they feel safe at work, and then I want to make sure that they feel like they belong. And that's where that buddy or mentor can come in, because sometimes, and especially if you have a high turnover situation, some of your population might not be so warm to the newest person, right? And I saw this a lot of, that's the reason for turnover sometimes. If people are like, oh my gosh, here's the 5th person starting this week, they'll probably be gone tomorrow, and we're not putting that time in that person, well, maybe that's the reason they're gone tomorrow. So we do need to treat every single person, in a way that makes them feel comfortable. And in order to do that, I love this picture of equity. Some people might need a little bit more of a leg up, right? So we just think, come on in. And yes, we have different levels of skills, but everybody should be able to do the same job with the same resources. That is not always true. So some people might need a little leg up, right? You have a recent college graduate without a lot of work experience. They may need things that you haven't even considered. And one of those examples for me was somebody making small talk, right? She's like, I can't, she's, in a position where she needs to network and meet people. And she didn't know. She was very introverted, and she was like, I don't even know what to say. So we did a networking training. So just think of those things that maybe 10, 15 years ago, you didn't think you had to train. You might need to help people out. So for small businesses, certainly referrals and networking, all the tools that we talked about, certainly creating that consistent interview process, and, partnering with Department of Labor, or, those trade schools we talked about. Any workforce development programs can be super helpful. I'm going to skip that one in the spirit of time, Trevor. So like I said in the beginning, you want to audit your current hiring process. Again, if you take nothing else from this, let's go and look what we're doing, what's working, what's not, and do we have a succession plan? And are we working it? And is there more than one person involved in it? So, you know, a lot of times we put all of this, oh, that's human resources job, right? That's a function of HR. No, it's a leadership job. So you want your managers involved in this. You want them giving their input. And understanding and involved in your hiring process. You want to make sure you have those standardized interview questions. You want to, you know, dig into your compliance procedures. Let's, you know, audit our exempt versus non-exempt. You want to invest in your onboarding. What does that look like? Let's talk to some of our new hires. How did they feel? You know, what is your retention looking like? And these things can tell you a lot about how you're doing. And then making sure that you're always, you know, keeping ears and eyes open and those conversations going. You might not have a bona fide spot right now, but let's make sure we're talking to those people who have the skills that we need ongoing. So better hiring begins with better systems. Again, you know, I cannot say enough. You know, and I say 10 plus, I think we have people, you know, that have, you know, probably 8 people and use iSolve to just keep them focused. And certainly, you know, there's certain aspects of iSolve that you can just use for applicant tracking and communication with Indeed and getting them hired on, or any other platform like that. Using the AI technology that we talked about, making sure that you have the ability to pivot, right? So we just had a position open at GTM and we were having a lot of difficulty. We actually extended 3 or 4 offers, and you know, for whatever reason, you know, people were turning that down. So they looked at the position itself and reorganized it. So we've got to be willing to think outside the box and change the way we're doing things. And again, we all know that, you know, great hiring improves culture, includes profitability. That short-staffed situation, right? We've all seen businesses AC after COVID. We're not open the same hours. We're not open for a whole day because we don't have staff, right? I just interviewed a young woman who, you know, again, had to leave her job because her special needs son's school didn't have the staff to stay open. So, you know, we're having a lot of challenges and we can't just throw our hands up, right? So let's talk to each other. Just giving yourself so much credit for coming to this webinar today to educate yourself. Sometimes it's a lot of stuff that you know, but we have to dig back in, right? Again, we can keep chugging along like everything's fine, everything's working. Oh, but wait a minute, our turnover has been up, you know, these last 6 months. What's happening? So making sure we're looking at that. So we want to, you know, I've kind of peppered in GTM's HR consulting services and the wonderful things we do here at GTM. We can be, you know, super helpful, whether it's the iSolve system or consulting. And I believe Raleigh is going to talk about that now.
I sure will. Hey, great presentation, Sara. Hang in briefly. I'm going to tell you a couple things about GTM and our HR team, but right after that, we'll get to a couple quick questions here so we can tap into a little more of your knowledge along the way. You know, we're seeing many companies struggling to fill open positions because they don't have the resources to effectively recruit and manage the hiring process. Well, GTM is here to help. Our HR consultants, like Sara, have many years of experience in finding talent for companies by leveraging behavioral interviewing techniques, cultural awareness, and a deep understanding of people. We work on each search as your HR manager, understanding your business and finding employees who can add value to your organization. A GTM HR consultant can identify, interview, screen, and present the very best candidates for your consideration as you need them. Our executive search is a specialized recruitment service designed to identify, attract, and hire senior level executives, C-suite professionals, and key leadership positions within an organization. It goes beyond traditional recruitment by focusing on individuals with their experience, expertise, and vision necessary to steer your company towards success. We'll help you find top-tier executive talent that aligns seamlessly with your company's vision, culture, and strategic goals. Okay, time for a couple of quick questions. We'll get a couple in here. If you're ready, Sara, I'm going to fling them right at you. I got a question that came up in our chat question functionality. Somebody said, which staff should have succession planning? Should I have succession planning for? So I guess that means what positions should they really prepare on succession planning?
So yes, it would be all your positions. So again, I think most of us know that it's that unplanned, unexpected, somebody gets an offer they can't refuse, like I mentioned, that can really throw us. So, it can be a little hard to be like, well, I'm going to kind of keep an eye on things in the background, for somebody who's been here 25 years and I expect to retire, but you do want to keep an eye on that. So you would prioritize, and that's part of the succession planning. There's we have a whole process that we use with our clients to say, where's this, but it's every position we go through, every single position. What is the flight risk? What is the knowledge this person would take with them? What is the days to hire? Those kinds of things. So really it should be every position in your organization that you're looking at.
Next question, where can I get a current New York State application for prospective employees? Do they have guidelines you have to follow? Imagine they do.
Yes, there's I saw that one. Let me look I'm pretty sure on the Department of Labor there is an application. But I will get back to you specifically on that. And I did want to talk about that a little bit. We got chatting about that when we saw that question, that using a paper application, again, you really have to understand your business model and who you're hiring. My college kid came home and he just needs a job for a little bit. And so stewards, who I don't know about you guys, but locally, like I go in, I never feel like they're understaffed. They have good people, hardworking, they always acknowledge, and they use paper applications. So, it's good to know. So that's not totally outdated anymore. Sometimes that can be a real quick hit, and then you have them fill out all the stuff. But let me double check that on the Department of Labor. It's dol.newyork.gov, I believe, which is on one of the slides that you can find a legal application to make sure you're not asking any wrong questions. But we'll get that to you.
All right, we have one more question, just in because of where the clock is showing us. Anybody that had a question and we didn't get to it today, we can get back to you this week. What applicant tracking system would you recommend?
Yeah, so we talked about that as far as, iSolved being, certainly, I am biased because that's what we use here at GTM, but I'm being very honest with years of experience with many different ones. PeopleSoft, again, I don't know how far they've come since I used them. I wasn't crazy about it. But yeah, I just really love, how iSolved just brings everything together, from the minute you're recruiting, it's, plugged in with Indeed, makes it really easy to call and screen. It makes it easy to communicate across leadership because you can leave each other notes. I find it very, very user-friendly, helpful, efficient, and, certainly seems really good on the applicant end as well.
Well, Sara, thank you so much for sharing all your expertise with us today. We appreciate that. If you have additional questions, feel free to contact Sara. Right there on your screen, you can see her contact information. You can reach out to Sara. If you're interested in learning more about GTM's HR consulting services, contact Andrew Gowinski. His information's right there on the screen. He's happy to help you out. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Be sure to look for that email we're going to send out today that has a link to a recording of this presentation along with a PDF version of today's presentation. Everyone, please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.